Welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint. Start designing your next adventure.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us on another Travel Around Table podcast episode where we discuss the beautiful diversity of our planet. If this is your first time tuning into the show, welcome. If you are a reoccurring guest, thank you. I'm sorry, a reoccurring listener, thank you. So before we get started, I do want to bring to your attention, if you are in the travel industry in any way and are interested in joining the Travel Around Table podcast for a future episode, please reach out to us at thetravelersblueprint@gmail.com and we will add you to the guest list for future episodes. Before we dive into the topic today, I'm going to take 1 minute to introduce each of our panel members. They're going to tell us where they're located, how they're involved in the travel community, and where you can find them online to follow them. So, Leah, why don't we get started with you?
Sure. Thanks, guys. It's good to be back. My name is Leah. I'm based in Los Angeles. I am a virtual event host and event leader for the Nomadic Network. And I also co-created and co-host Ticket to Anywhere podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is, as we talked about before we came online, this is your third one. So Welcome back. Yeah, Tasha?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be back. I haven't done this type of a panel discussion, but it's nice to see you guys again. I am in Barcelona, Spain. I'm originally from the United States, from the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, and I am a reporter and a writer, and I've been focusing on the topic of sustainability, sustainable development, and I created my own series called Evidence of Hope, and it's documenting people around the world who are addressing these huge global challenges with beautiful solutions. And you are more than welcome to watch and follow along. You can see evidenceofhope.com, or you can follow me on social media, Tasha Goldberg.
Yeah, and Tasha, when you came on our podcast, we ended up finding out that we're located just a few towns apart, which was pretty crazy. So that was really funny. Amanda.
So hi everyone, I am over here or down here in Perth, Western Australia. So it's very early in the morning here. I am mostly a podcaster at the Thoughtful Travel podcast, and I still blog at notaballerina.com as well. So I like to think and talk about all things thoughtful travel. And very soon I'm launching a kids travel podcast with my 10-year-old, which is called Taking Off. So we are all about the good parts of travel and what we can learn from them, and as well as how fun it is.
Yeah, thank you. And Ian.
Hey guys, good to be with you all. So yeah, I'm Ian, and I'm a travel videographer, frequent flyer. Last year I hosted a web series for the Points Guy and traveled all around using airline miles to fund some pretty wild adventures. I'm also host of a recently launched podcast called Up in the Air, and that pretty much sums me up. So yeah, I'm here in San Diego, California, and this year's been rough for all of us in the travel world. Haven't been out of the country since February, but happy to be healthy and glad that the same is true for my family. So first world problems.
Yes. Right. Yeah, that's what I keep coming back to. So far, other than not being able to travel the world, I haven't been impacted too much. And that's what you have to just keep reminding yourself. It's how bad is it really when the worst thing is, you can't travel to go to Italy or whatever it may be. But thank you all for joining us. Ian, welcome to the podcast world. Congratulations on starting a podcast.
Thank you.
Podcasting has been really what has kept our wanderlust at bay, I guess, so to speak. Being able to do these podcasts and speak on travel so often allows us to sort of, feel like you're at least getting something related to travel. So, yeah, welcome.
You're still getting a taste of those unique experiences, and that was really the big impetus for why I wanted to start one, just because I missed that, and having been able to speak with so many people and hear their experiences, I see a lot of nods around here, has been a little, fulfilling in the same way.
Right. Yeah. It's, I think it might be the next best thing, really, in a lot of ways. So today's topic is an interesting one. It's a good one, and it's something that we all strive to achieve, and it's travel etiquette. And there is a lot to unravel when it comes to travel etiquette, because I think once that's sort of a very broad term, and then you can go down multiple avenues of what that actually means. So before we get into travel etiquette, I kind of want to define it. And Amanda, I think I'm going to call you out on this one, running the Thoughtful Travel podcast. What does travel etiquette mean to you?
Well, I think it's a great and important question. So I think basically having good travel etiquette is about being mindful of the norms and the habits and the customs of your destination and making sure that you don't clash with these too badly. So I think if you have good travel etiquette, then you have at least made a good effort to understand how things work culturally and, typical customs and habits in your destination. And we will never get it perfectly right. But I think having the right intention and trying and learning and, having that for quite in the forefront of your mind when you are especially in a brand new to you culture, that you are trying to quote unquote do the right thing by the locals, then I think you can consider you have good travel etiquette.
Yeah, I agree. I think step one is usually research and just know where you're going and the people who occupy the land that you're visiting, and at least have the basics down, right? Don't go in completely blind. And then once you're there, I mean, it's funny. And I was talking to Elliot about this before we jumped on today. It is hard, and you can be a considerate person and go in with the best intentions and still mess up, like Amanda, you just said. And there was a time when I visited Peru, and it was the next morning. So we got there very late at night. I think it was 10 p.m. or something. We essentially had to go there. We grabbed a few beers and we went to bed because we were just exhausted from traveling all day. The next morning we woke up, we rolled out of bed. We were in downtown Lima in the Miraflores section, I believe. And we went into a cafe, and I just walked up and I started speaking English. And I just forgot, and I felt so rude. And
it's not like you know Spanish.
I don't know Spanish, but I would have at least made an attempt, and I could say a few words. But I just hey, excuse me, let me get a coffee, please. And it was just and then I looked at their face and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in Peru, I'm not in Philadelphia, and I can't speak like that. And I felt really bad because obviously my intentions weren't there, but how many American travelers do that and expect that? And so I'm sure I looked like a jerk to them, maybe, but
no, you look like an American.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't the first time.
Did you forget that you woke up in Lima?
No, it's not that I forgot. I don't know. I was just maybe in thought. I don't know. And then as soon as it came out of my mouth, yeah.
To be fair, you were walking around with two other American guys, and we were all talking English while we were walking around Lima in the morning trying to find a place to get breakfast. And then, yeah, you were the first one to order, so you're just like, I'll have a coffee.
To me,
I'm sure you've never forgotten again, Bob.
It still haunts me.
See? So that's the thing. You have the right intention. That's, I think, often the best we can do.
Right.
When we travel so much, at least domestically, I'm in two very different modes when I leave the country versus when I travel domestically. And I think particularly in the frequent business travel community, there's this kind of pervasive notion. It's kind of like a know-it-all kind of traveler. But I think when you travel internationally, you really have to be a sponge, and you have to start with the base assumption that you know nothing and that you're not right about everything, and expect that kind of along the way, each thing you encounter, you're going to have to learn. And instead of having the expectation of how it should go. So those are kind of the two different mindsets that I approach domestic and international travel with. And certainly some areas of the country in the US, still you need to be a bit sponge-like. But in general, I do think that's the major difference for me, is just not starting with that assumption that you know how things should go.
Yeah, I really like that. The fact that being a sponge is probably the first step in being travel etiquette savvy?
I would add to that maybe something about what you feel like you have, that there's an etiquette in what you feel like you have access to. You know, it's easy to sort of go in and feel like I'm here and I want to know everything. Like, tell me your recipes and where did your grandmother, where was it? And sometimes it's like not appropriate. And so that's another layer of finding the ways that are sort of polite. So like for me, I travel and I collect records, and music is sort of something that people make to share. So it's like an appropriate place to be curious, and where the doors are sort of already open. It's not, asking for something that's really deep and private, intimate, and it gives you a chance to start to build some relationships.
Yeah, I think that's very important to consider. And, obviously I'm an American and all of my major experiences are here, but I realized traveling around that a lot of the cultural norms, the conversations we have, the things we ask one another are not typical in other nations. Even the way we greet each other and certain body language is not typical. And so I do think it's important to make sure that you at least spend a little bit of time in your travel planning considering cultural norms, as much as you consider, how long it's going to take to get from the Colosseum to the Vatican. You need to understand the certain cultural norms, just as important. A major thing that I realized is, in the United States, it's very common to discuss what you do for a living, but it's not at all acceptable to get into how much you make. Whereas other countries, that's really not, you don't get into what you do as a living. It's almost seen as an odd question. It doesn't define you like it does in the United States. And I mean, that's just one example. Amanda, is that correct with Australia? Does that come up as one of the major things? I know in the United States, when you meet somebody, it's probably in the first 5 questions. Hey, what for a living? If it even makes it that far.
He would say, well, what do you do? And the intention is mostly that's going to be, what's your career? So I would like to think that wasn't the case, but I think it's still, still is. But we also don't talk about money. So it's, we're very heavily influenced by American culture these days. So.
Sorry.
Yeah. For good or for bad. Deathly silence.
Yeah, and I can't remember now which culture I'm thinking of, because I thought it was a Western culture that did not view occupation as seriously as we do, where it was more, you introduce yourself to somebody and it's, what do you do for fun? What is your passion?
Right.
What about your family? And that's sort of how you define yourself to that person in that moment, whereas it's very immediate, what do you do is essentially how much money do you make, really? Or at least
it's a status question.
It
how
puts
can I judge you?
Exactly. It definitely identifies you in a certain class. Yeah, right.
Which is very American. Wanting to know what class you're in and if you're better than me.
I think that there's a lot of places that also ask not American, but maybe Hawaii is American. I spent a lot of my life living there, and it was about your family, where are you from, what part of the island are you from, what's your anchor, and it's a little different when you're traveling, but in maybe more traditional or village or indigenous cultures, I think that question comes up more than what you do, because what you do is you survive and enjoy your life.
That's what it should be. Yeah. Well, since I heard that, and I need to go back and find which culture actually does not prioritize occupation, because I'm curious, but since I heard that, since I heard that, I was like, that's a great idea. If I'm at a party and I'm meeting somebody new, I'm going to see how long I can avoid asking that question.
Yes.
And ask about their interests, anything else, anything else. And see how it goes and try it, because I'm really curious to gauge a relationship or start a relationship that way.
I would wager the top 5 countries in the gross national happiness index do not ask that question.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. Yeah.
But I also think that when you're traveling, or at least half the people I meet when I'm traveling have just quit their job or they're on a career break. So they end up saying, I'm not doing anything. This is what I'm doing right now. I'm traveling. So it's kind of like a useless question if I'm meeting people and I'm like, oh, well, it doesn't matter what you do because you could go home and do something different from what I just asked you.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Bob,
Yeah.
I do that same thing at parties now, ever since like my little around the world romp. I'm like, okay, don't ask people what they do, because I've stopped defining myself what I do, like what company my name is tied to, right? And more of what am I passionate about? So why wouldn't I want to know that about others?
Right. I agree. Yeah, I like it. All right, so we kind of established what travel etiquette is, and it's essentially to consider the culture, really, is what it is before you go. Does anybody have, besides your own platform, resources that you may recommend or ways that you can learn about a country prior to your departure? Is there anything specific?
Tasha, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like, I love this part. I mean, when I know where I'm going, I love that part of exploring, and I like to go about it like looking at different sort of angles. So like I want to read literature and mythology and listen to the music and look at what's going on in the newspapers. I think that something that's like always been fun for me is like when you're traveling, you know, a lot of times you have to go through a couple of different airports to get somewhere, especially if you're going somewhere really remote. And it's always interesting to look at how, you know, maybe the New York Times and then, you know, the newspapers in London or wherever you're passing through, like how they're telling the same stories about where you're going, you know, it sort of gives you this perspective about everyone's talking about the same thing, but differently in their own way. So I do think that literature, the arts, basically, I think that the arts are always a really beautiful way to connect to a place because it's a special voice. You know, it's kind of it's personal. It's not like you take it and you say this is exactly how it is here, but you started to get a social context and a feeling about where you're going to be traveling.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I look to foreign publications for my news now, just to see, just to draw my own conclusion from someone outside of the U.S., essentially to try to avoid bias. I never thought to do that to get an idea or grasp the general consensus of what's going on in that country. That's an interesting way to do it. Yeah. Huh.
I think field guides are usually really good because, right, they have like the basics of each country that you want to go to. And it's not like a complete, this is everything you need to know. It's, this is what you should know to pass through and, you know, live on a daily basis. Like a few phrases, knowing the currency, knowing the exchange rates, knowing, you know, dress code and simple greetings. Field guides pretty much have all of that without going into too much detail.
There's Frommers. Go ahead.
Like a Frommers. I think, what's the other one? Falcon?
Lonely Planet. There's
Lonely Planet. Yeah. I was just going to say, I recently read a Lonely Planet guide on some Central American locations. And I was actually, I mean, obviously this information is also online, but the information is very succinct in those guides and it's very helpful. But I think kind of a more modern take on that is there are so many travel podcasts now that if you were to just literally search for the destination you're going to, I guarantee you could find probably a minimum of half a dozen great podcasts on that location, if not, you know, a dozen or 2 dozen. There's so many now, but particularly if it's a popular destination, and you know, to hear in depth someone's experience and the kind of cultures that they adhered to. I mean, I think that's pretty much all you need to know. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think podcasts are a great way to learn. Obviously, I'm biased. I have a podcast, but the reason I have a podcast is because I already was using them, you know, for information, right. And yeah, it allows you to typically you get a critical discussion on whatever, you know, the topic of that podcast is. You can listen to different opinions. You can listen to people go through their experiences. And while you can get that same information in a blog, there's just something that I prefer to actually hearing someone go through it. You can get a better feel for maybe their emotions and things like that. It just feels more personal. That's why I enjoy podcasts so much. So yeah, that's a great point. And for people who may not know this, but you can search for podcasts by topic. You know, if you're going to Machu Picchu, you can simply type Machu Picchu into the search bar and you'll get every episode from every travel podcast related to Machu Picchu. You don't need to find a travel podcast and then search for a specific country. It's actually very easy to find very specific topics that way.
Yeah. And I think also just one more note on that, you know, you can read like, okay, in Sri Lanka, it's very, it's perfectly acceptable to eat with your hands. But if you actually listen to a podcast where someone kind of recounts their experience of eating a meal with their hands, you can get a better sense for, okay, in what circumstance should I make sure I'm eating with my hands, or in what circumstance would it be completely fine to eat with a fork if you prefer to do that. So I think the emotion that you can get from actually listening to a conversation and kind of hearing just the inflection in someone's voice kind of gives you a little bit more than you would get from reading a resource about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So can we get into some specifics of like, what are the typical travel etiquette pieces that you will experience in every single country, right? Like the one I think of first and foremost is language and just being able to say hello the right way.
It's so important to know a handful of words. Like that's all you need to make a massive difference. And I'm always surprised when people don't, you know, try, even if it is literally just hello and thank you. But even that just shows a level of respect to the local language and local people that, you know, I think it's like absolutely essential to at least have that level of language basics. And, you know, it's easy these days. There's a million apps or websites or whatever, podcasts, so you can learn a few words of a language. I mean, the more the better.
Yeah.
But at least if you can, like Bob says, when you walk into the coffee shop, you don't say, don't start off with, hello, you know, I'd like a coffee. You start off with, you know, the local language, good morning, you know, just that. It just breaks down that barrier
Poor
straight
Bob,
away.
we're like, we're shaming you.
Sorry, Bob.
It's okay.
He knew what he was getting himself into.
I deserve it. Yeah. Yeah. And something I want to add, if anybody knows what it's like to want someone to be able to at least communicate a little bit in their language, it's Americans. They can't stand when people travel here and can't speak English. It's insane.
Craziest double standard.
It's the craziest stuff. And they're the ones who then go to other countries and I'm like speaking like I'm not an American, but we're the ones who then portray that in other countries and get angry when we can't communicate over there without making any conscious effort to do so. So yeah,
a similar thing with language and the just saying hi or bye is knowing that there are different phrases in that local culture, right? Americans we say hi, we say hello, we say what's up. We have probably 10 to 12 different ways of saying or greeting someone, and there are just as many in many other languages. And having that repertoire of different greetings can make you appear, you may not be a local, but you'll appear more like a local, and that you are trying to do more than just pass through.
It can
or to learn how to say like it's cool.
Yes,
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, go Tasha. Yeah.
I was just like, you know, like if you can say like that's cool or something, like, you know, like a slang word of some sort, then like you know, kids love that. They, you know, like it's like funny, like they're probably like laughing at you, but they also, it's like an icebreaker.
Yeah. Amanda, what were you saying?
I was just going to say that it is, it can be tricky sometimes. I remember last year still, when I was in Denmark, and because I speak German, I'd picked up quite a bit of Danish, but really just greetings and stuff. But I guess my accent was decent enough, and everywhere we went, I would greet in Danish and say a couple of phrases. But then they assumed I could speak Danish fluently, and it goes blah, 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 and it's long, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't understand. Which is, I almost felt like it's more awkward than not. So then I tried to do greetings in Danish, but with a worse accent, so that they could tell I was foreign. Because because then I felt uncomfortable for them because they'd said all this stuff that I couldn't understand. And so it was, to me, it's all about trying to fit in, but make the local people comfortable as well. And of course, in Denmark, everyone speaks English. So there's I don't think they're offended by having to speak English to me. But I want to start with some Danish. It was quite tricky to know where to pitch my Danish, quote unquote.
There's certain places too where they like relish the opportunity to try to speak English, and they really appreciate actually if you're like willing to have a conversation with them, just so they can kind of practice. I ran into that in Doha in Qatar, where I mean a vast majority of people do speak English already because they're I don't know what the actual percentage is, but a staggering percentage of people that live in Doha are not from Qatar. And so just attributed to that fact that you kind of have a lot of people who need to learn another language. But even a couple Qatari people were like, "Oh, you're American. I'd love to like talk to you in English." It was really fun.
Bob and I ran into that when we were in Peru. One of our drivers going from a few of the villages in the Inca Valley, I could speak some Spanish, so they were able to ask me a few questions, and then we actually had basically translating sessions, and we were teaching each other. I was teaching him English, he was teaching me better Spanish, and it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. But you're right, it does happen more often than not, especially when you know a second or third language.
Yeah, I'll never forget the Swedish hello. Hey, hey. That's it.
That's so pleasant.
Hey, hey. Yeah.
I like it in Slovak and Czech and stuff. It's ahoy, which I think is kind of cool.
It's like
no way.
pirate-ish.
Yeah.
All day. Ahoy, ahoy, ahoy.
I don't know if I could get used to that.
Yeah.
Oh, you do, I promise.
All right.
So language is a big one. Want to move on to food?
Yes.
Let's move on to food. So
also, I'm very hungry right now, so this is going to be
food is a big one. I actually was a vegetarian. I was born a vegetarian, raised a vegetarian, and like food is something that is like, if somebody is like offering to like cook for you in their home, it felt to me like I needed to just be able to say yes instead of being like, actually, can you steam some broccoli for me? Like it just was a little too like, so I started eating meat, and my very first meat experience was pretty intense. Should I tell you guys about that?
Yes. I don't think we learned about this on your episode.
I just really want us to like commit to like not judging me right now. Okay.
No judgment. This is judgment-free zone.
Yes. Yes.
So I was, so I was working and traveling back and forth to China. I was doing a project in China, and I was working with a community, and it was a lot of this like trust building that was happening. Like I would go and come back, and like I really wanted to connect with them because I was talking to them about their challenges and trying to create sustainability projects that weren't like, projecting what I think they should do, but actually helping them. And so there was this day after a couple of visits that I was invited for lunch, and I was kind of like, yay, like, okay. And I saw the fire, getting started, and I saw this man on a bicycle with 2 big baskets full of puppies. And I was like, well, I really hope that that's for something, not lunch. And it was lunch. And it was just a really like, I just like in that moment, I had already like prepared myself that I was not going to be too picky. And I was thinking that was going to be like chicken, not puppy. And so, like I, watched the whole thing happen, and, it was a huge knife and all these like puppies getting killed, and then cooking it. And then we ate it. So,
wow.
That's how polite and good etiquette I am, is that I ate puppy for my first
10
meat.
out of 10 for good cultural
There
etiquette.
is no judgment there.
I don't think I could have done it.
Especially watching it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like, there's like, if we can separate and be like, we, package something that you just like buy at a store and you don't really have an association, but like, I definitely like had the whole experience. And I mean, I didn't go back for seconds, to be clear. But I like, I didn't want to be like, give them the impression that what they were eating was like disgusting to me, or I didn't want to judge them. And the puppies aren't pets there. They're like, what maybe pigs are like in certain parts of the world. Like it's just a different, connection or relationship with like what is a pet and what is food. And so yeah, so
what
that
did
was,
it taste like?
well, the thing is that I don't really have a good answer, because it was like, it was just meat, like it wasn't like tofu, like it was, I don't have any, I didn't
Oh, yeah,
at
you didn't
that
have a good
point
frame of
have like
reference.
That's true.
a
Yeah.
reference. And
Comparison.
it wasn't bad, to be honest. I was with two guys who were the
Just use a little puppy
videographers.
seasoning and
Yeah, totally. And they were like, they were enjoying it. And I had my serving to be polite. But yeah, like there's been a lot of, really interesting foods that I've had because I was, in creating trust and intimacy, and that people were offering me, food. But I think that, in the end, I never regretted it. And I feel like it never made me sick. And, the things that I feel like I've gotten sick from eating abroad are not what people have cooked me in their homes. It's like, it's these things were made with love and it's shared with love and eaten with love. So
I really like
happen to
this
be
topic because I've always wondered about individuals that have, by choice, dietary restrictions. Because obviously, celiac disease, you just can't eat gluten. But choosing to be vegetarian, choosing to be vegan while traveling is often puts you in precarious positions, especially when A, you may not know what the food you're getting at a restaurant is, but B, if you're having one of those in-home experiences like Tasha had and you want to be polite and you want to be courteous to them, do you forego your last, in Tasha's case, what was it, 25 years of being vegetarian?
I was older than that. I think I was like probably, but yeah, basically, like it was like, I remember afterwards, like there was a cute t-shirt and I was shopping with my sister and it was like something like, hug me, I'm a vegetarian. And she's like, but you're not. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not a vegetarian. The shame,
Do you
I
eat
had a
meat
similar
now?
experience. So
Are you, like, I don't buy a lot of meat, but I do eat meat. Like it sort of started me. I also lived in Hawaii for a really long time. And so I started eating fish when I was in Hawaii. And, it was a similar situation where I lived in a neighborhood where there was a family that was a fisherman, and it was like a community experience to like share food together. And yeah, like, because normally, not this year, but normally I'm on the road all the time. So I have learned to value like experiencing a culture through the culinary, part of what's going on there, and tasting things and just being a lot more relaxed. But like when I'm home, I'm like, I don't usually like go to the store and buy a steak. You know what I mean?
Right.
I apologize, Amanda, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I'm similar. I grew up vegetarian and I don't really like eating meat in general, but the same when I travel, if it's given to me, then I do try and eat it. I had so especially like a large piece of meat, I really, really struggle with. And when I was living in Japan, I had these very dear friends who took us out. It was like a very special event. We got dressed up like in kimono and everything. It was a special national holiday. We went to a very fancy restaurant and they ordered me this huge steak. And I was like, oh no, like, I don't know how they didn't know that I was vegetarian, but anyway, miscommunication, language issues, whatever. And so then I had to, of course, to be polite, I would always try and do that. And so I did, but it was really hard. And also I was in this very tight kimono. And so my stomach was not coping well with this meat. And to the point where I kind of shuffled some under, like, some leftover veggies and things. I tried to do my best. And then I couldn't fit in dessert, which was very tragic for me. But yeah, in general, I think etiquette is about trying to fit in. in general. And so, yeah, obviously, if it's a
Right.
dietary reason that you're going to be sick by eating something, that's a completely different matter. But yeah, I think it's kind of appropriate to amend your like own personal ethics to fit in culturally and with good etiquette. So I completely agree, Tasha. Although I don't think I
One
could
that
have done
always
what you
sticks.
did
You'd be
It's
surprised, you know,
amazing.
like
in the
I don't,
situation, perhaps. Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, like there's things that you wouldn't be like on a menu, like I'm gonna have puppy and then some baboon, and you know, like it's just that's totally. But then somebody like shares with you something that they just like hunted or gathered or prepared. It's like, you know, it's. I'm sure you would. I can tell already. You're so sweet and nice. Like you wouldn't be like, ew, gross.
I'm so sweet. I would eat puppies.
yeah, that's the new sweet.
So
You know what I mean?
Thank you.
One that always sticks out to me is how, you know, the culture of Japan is kind of renowned for its politeness and just like how respectful they are of everyone. But, you know, what's funny is they slurp their noodles like nobody's business.
And sniff when they have a cold. And it's polite to do that.
Yeah. And it's obviously, it's completely normal. But that really kind of threw me for a loop when I first went there, because I mean, here it's very impolite to slurp anything. But yeah, if you go get ramen in Tokyo or anywhere in Japan, you will see that everywhere.
Don't tell my wife that, because now she won't go. He hates mouth noises.
But
she might need earplugs for parts of Japan.
I'll just add also a similar story to Tasha. It's not quite as dramatic, but when I was in Turkey, I was getting a tour of this old monastery in Cappadocia, and the man who oversees this monastery brought me up into this chamber, which is like buried into the cliffside. And he was like, here's the holy water. And I was like, wow, it's crazy. There's like this creek that flows through the rock, through the cliff. And he was like, you'll drink it. And I was like, I will. And he was like, yeah, just drink the holy water. And it's literally just kind of flowing, free flowing water. So, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, all right, I mean, this guy's telling me I got to do it. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to do it, even though this is just like, who knows where this water originates from, where it went before.
What's upstream?
But hey, it was holy water. I didn't get sick, so
he's alive. So yeah.
Exactly. You gotta. That is not even a minuscule part of traveling. That is one of the greatest parts, is just kind of believing in the process and just saying okay. And I think the more I've been able to embrace situations like that and have those kinds of experiences, the more rewarding and the more fulfilling my travel experiences have been.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're all traveling to feel a curiosity, right? And what better way than to dive into foods that are completely foreign to you, unheard of. They don't exist.
I thought you were going to say, what better way than to forget all of your ethics that you've grown up with.
Well, hey, if you got to do that too, no judgment.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That's where the sayings like when in Rome. That's the whole point.
Actually.
Mm-hmm.
Great point.
Yeah.
When I was in Cambodia, I ate tarantula for the exact same reason. And it was cooked. It was served at a restaurant on a banana leaf. You know, it was like.
How crunchy was it?
Crunchy? Yeah.
Very, very crunchy. It's, it'd been deep fried. To be totally honest, the taste wasn't really the issue. It was just the mental.
Yeah. I imagine biting into a bugle.
Yeah.
Ruined bugles.
That's accurate. That's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I regret not eating bugs in Thailand. I got cold feet and I wanted to try them. They had like the scorpions on the stick and I think it was crickets and stuff. And
they have those in Arizona.
Crickets are great. I'm a fan of crickets.
In a lollipop.
Yeah. One of my friends actually brought me one from her trip to Arizona, and I had it. And I ate it after like 6 months. But I did. I ate the whole scorpion in the middle. I got to it. And it took 3,824 licks.
Oh.
I believe that you definitely counted to it. Does anybody have a story where they did not take the food?
Great
Yeah.
question.
But I'm pescatarian, so luckily I kind of have a saving grace when I travel. I don't eat meat, but I'm like, oh, but I'll eat the seafood and I'll eat the fish. But everywhere I go, I kind of refuse the meat. And if that happens, I just carb load, which I don't really like to do. It's always like bread, cheese, or rice, because I'm like, great, this is filling, but it's like I just feel uncomfortably full. But I've been in many situations where I've refused the food, but it's never backfired on me. So, yeah.
Right.
That's good to know. It's good to know that you haven't been kicked out of the country.
I have not yet. No. Hoping to never be kicked out of anywhere. That's
good. So another piece of travel etiquette that I always have issues with is photography. I mean, taking pictures of landmarks and places is one thing, but when you want to remember the culture, taking pictures of people abroad it's hit or miss. It is often more polite to ask, but at what point can you just take the picture and not ask if they're 300 feet away?
That's a great one.
Right.
I have kind of developed a little bit of a process for this, which is it's basically the smile test. So if I see somebody and I want to capture them in a video or a photo, I'll basically, especially if it's like at a market, just let's take the example of somebody at a market, they're preparing food or they're performing something. I'll kind of like look at them, give them a big smile. And if they smile back, I'll usually raise up the camera. And I typically find that they have zero issues after that.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, because you have a lot of experience with taking pictures of people and filming people.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people who the camera is a barrier, absolutely. And when you raise that camera up, immediately people kind of shut down their natural affect. And I do find that like starting without it and just like making a personal connection, even if it's just a smile, makes a huge, huge difference. And I recommend it now, because everybody knows that phones take pictures. Maybe that wasn't the case like 6-7 years ago, but everybody expects the same now. So, even with a phone, if you're trying to just capture what's going on, I would recommend the same thing. And I think it builds up some goodwill because you don't just come in with guns blazing, you kind of show up. And you do show them that you're there to kind of try to respect their presence by at least acknowledging them first without the camera.
Have you had anyone reject your camera?
Well, I have had, there's this place in Turkey, it kind of drives me nuts. It's like one of those Instagram photo spots, and it's this rug store. And I'm sure you guys have seen photos of it. But basically, if you walk in there with a camera, they just immediately start asking you for money, or get pretty frustrated because they assume you're just not following the rules. And they have posted everywhere, if you want to take pictures, you need to pay. And it ends up being like maybe $10. And that kind of frustrates me because, there's perfectly legitimate reasons why you would just have your camera on a camera strap and walk around, but not take photos and be respectful. But that's kind of one place that comes to mind immediately. I haven't been in many places where they're like hostile to people who are trying to document things. But it absolutely happens. I wish I could come up with a better example for you.
Well, Tasha, you spent some time in Dar es Salaam, correct?
No, Tanzania though.
Okay. So I spent a little bit of time in Dar es Salaam, the capital of Tanzania, maybe 8 years ago. And the reason I ask you this, Ian, is because there was we went to a bar for lunch, and we were outside. We were taking photos of the bar itself in the city, and one of the females that we were traveling with had her camera out taking pictures, and she took a picture with two gentlemen that were in it. And they got really upset that she took the picture. And they were so upset that they were asking her for her camera, and they would not back down. It probably took 5 to 10 minutes to calm the situation down because none of us spoke Swahili and they didn't speak English. So it was very frustrating. We were all in a big group though, and I didn't know if I think certain cultures definitely have or a less threshold for taking photos of them because they feel like they're being exploited.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of places where there's like the token local, and those people like literally will sit out somewhere with their local pottery or instrument and kind of get photos taken of them and get tipped. But then there's kind of the flip side, which is there's like people who are just trying to go about their life who hate being bothered by people.
Cusco is a great example of that, Bob. Mm-hmm. Like one of our pictures was Bob holding a baby llama with women in traditional Incan garb, and they literally just walk around the ruins and try to find white Americans to take photos with the llama. Yeah. And then you tip them, and then you're like, well, if you hold the llama, we'll tip you more.
Right.
Yeah.
And it pooped on me.
It did.
You get a refund on your tip for that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was the best part of the trip.
There is a something that needs to be said about the difference between taking pictures and enjoying yourself, and then the exploitation of the locals, right? That's like a hot topic and not something that I'm well versed on and can really speak on, but I do know that it's something to consider, and you should absolutely, especially if you're going to countries that have these issues, look into before you do travel there. This is sort of unrelated, but one time I was in a bar and I was traveling the country. I was in the United States, and this guy just walked up and he just held his phone like 6 inches from my face and took a picture of me and walked away. And he was just drunk, but
so weird.
Yeah, I have no idea why. He was just hammered in the bar. I think he got kicked out later for doing it to more people, but and so like the next day I was just like, what, that was awkward to just have someone walk up to you, take a picture of you as you're hanging out with your friends and just going on about their day. So I like the smile thing a lot, Ian. I've read before that the smile is virtually like, a universal gesture. There obviously well, not obviously, but there are certain cultures that don't accept handshakes the same way we do, and different finger signs and pointing, and that can vary from culture to culture. But smiling across the board seems to be, unless someone can correct me, seems to be the number one thing to do. Like that is the natural human gesture for I'm not a threat, I'm happy, how are you? Right.
100%.
Yeah.
It's just, it immediately breaks the barrier. And that's really why I think it's effective. And also, I mean, I typically I'm to shoot a lot of video. So I'm usually not just snapping one photo. I'll be there for a moment, and it's like, can be this large kind of contraption that I'm holding. And so you just want them to feel a little bit at ease. So anything to kind of make that happen.
Yeah. All right. Next topic. This is going to be an interesting one, I think, especially hearing Amanda's perspective. I want to talk about tipping.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is...
Can I go
How did
first?
20%?
No one knows. Do you tip? When do you tip? Now, us Americans, we have
How
an
did
idea.
20% just become customary in this country?
No idea. But so Ian,
Why is tipping necessary?
Yeah.
Just pay them more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We run a
doesn't
whole
make-
country over here without any tipping, and it seems like we're still doing okay.
Yeah.
We're still surviving with no
I
tipping.
love Australia for that reason.
But here's the thing. You could offend somebody if you don't tip in a place where tipping is the thing to do. But if
It's so
you
stressful.
if you tip, even if that's not a like normal custom, you're probably not going to offend somebody. So
I don't think that's entirely true, though, because I have
Really?
talked to locals in Southeast Asia and Japan who do find it offensive, because it's like saying, oh, you don't have enough money, so here we're white savior coming in to give you more. So you can offend people by tipping
Interesting.
I
inappropriately.
think if you're the token Western traveler and you show up and you're like trying to just throw out cash to everyone who helps you, there's a little bit of that. Like, okay, all right, cool it.
Right.
Like, white guy, we don't need all your money. I do think if you're like a local and you go to a bar all the time and tipping isn't customary, but like you leave your bartender a few bucks, like that's probably received differently.
Probably. I don't know. I find tipping the most stressful part of traveling, because
I agree.
obviously here in Australia, we don't do it ever. It's just not part of our custom. And so I find it extraordinarily stressful because I don't want to offend anyone. I want to tip an appropriate amount, but and I like there's so much etiquette involved that you guys as Americans probably have,
Yes.
you know so much more. You've practiced it so many times. Like I don't even know when in a situation, like when do you do it? Like in certain times it's not clear. I remember my mum was actually married to an American for a while, and she came back. She was living in California, actually near San Diego, and she came back from having her hair cut a few months after she'd moved there. And she came home and her husband said to her, "Oh, how much did you tip the hairdresser?" And she was like, "What? Oh no, do you have to tip the hairdresser?" She had no idea because like we don't do that.
Yeah.
And he said, "You have to go back. It's like the only hairdresser near here. You'll have to go back and do it straight away or they'll never cut your hair again," or, like this kind of stuff. And so she drove straight back and she put on her best Australianness and said, "I'm so sorry. And here's the tip." But I find it so stressful that I would rather not travel to countries where you have to tip because it's such a tricky part of the whole transaction for me.
I mean, I live in the US and I find it stressful.
It is. I've actually had a German, I traveled with a German guy one time, and he actually said, you Americans have ruined tipping for the entire world because now everyone expects us to tip because you have no idea when to tip. You don't know if you're tipping too much. You don't care. You just do it anyway. And I was like, that's been weighing on my mind heavy the past year. I'm like, have you really ruined it for everybody? Because now everyone expects any Westerner who has any sort of money to give like at least 20% of a tip. But to Ian's point earlier, I've also found that because I'm American, people just expect the tip from me. Every time I ask a question, take a picture, they do their hand thing where they're like, "All right, where is it?" And I'm like, "What? I just literally asked you a question. I asked you where the palace was. What do you mean you want like a $5 tip?" I'm sorry. Like,
I know you have it.
Yeah, right.
I know it's really sad because I'm like, no, I don't. That's not me. I don't go around giving tips for every time I ask a question. So it's, I think that shows what they think of us. And that happened to me a lot, I think in Southeast Asia, where they were more like, "All right, hand the tip over." I'm like, oh, it's frustrating.
It is very important to research that. If you plan on visiting restaurants, if you're not staying at a little B&B the entire time you're there where you don't have to think about meals or purchasing anything, you should learn how to tip in that destination.
Probably the research.
Amanda, to add confusion to the entire tipping process, a lot of it is intuition for me. Restaurants is like 20%, standard across the board.
How can I learn intuition?
Once you get into like a taxi driver and the bellhop and the guy who helps you load things into your car at the Home Depot and stuff, it's really odd.
I don't understand any of that.
You're tipping guys at Home Depot, Bob?
If it's like really heavy, they have to
figure it out. From outside, no. Do it.
That's the interesting thing. Like I did landscaping throughout college, and I was tipped for my manual labor. I got paid a regular wage, and then I got tipped, and I was like, "Is this normal?" And then growing up past that, my grandfather used to tip pretty much everyone. And I didn't know when you should tip. Like, do you tip the person that holds the door for you at a hotel? I don't know. Do you tip the person that brings your bags up for you at a hotel?
I tip my valet every time.
Yeah,
do you tip a valet?
Tip a
But
valet.
there's so many questions.
Yeah.
Like
With the hotel thing, I think that it's appropriate to do a tip at the end. Thank you. You don't have to tip every time, but I actually have a funny story about tipping. Should I tell you about that?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
So I think
Does it involve puppies?
No, I think I was in Istanbul, and I was I was there for a couple of weeks, and I had a hotel, and I was sort of like going to work every day, and the woman that was cleaning my room was so affectionate with me. She was like an older woman, and she would hug me and just I was kind of like, this is so nice. I feel like I have an auntie, I don't really we weren't really I didn't know her language. She didn't know my language, but she would just, every time she would see me in the hallway, she was just, and then I realized that I had left out some money that I was trying to figure out in my exchange, and she thought it was a tip and took it. And so she just thought that I was tipping her this massive amount of money. So we had this whole relationship that was fake based on a tip that I didn't even know I gave her.
Wow.
That's hilarious.
Just that I didn't even know I gave her.
Yeah, I thought we were like bonding.
I've heard some different etiquettes for tipping in hotels, and I haven't decided where I fall on this, so I'm actually curious what you guys think. But there is some people are of the frame of mind that you should, particularly if you know housekeeping will come every day, that you should leave a tip every day because it's a different person. And so, if you do leave like a big tip at the end, it might just go to the person who happened to clean your room that day, but you were being helped by several other people the day before. So I'm curious what you guys do at hotels, and I guess I'm not thinking of any particular region, but maybe if you have a region
definitely
specific.
only tip at the end for housekeeping.
I tip at the end, and then how much I tip is again intuition on how dirty I made the room. If I'm just passing through and I crash in the bed and I get up and I'm on my way the next morning and I really didn't touch anything, I'll leave a few bucks. But if I'm there for a week and they need to come in throughout my time there, I'll leave more. And again, it's just a judgment because there really isn't any particular number. It's just how generous you want to be and how much money you have. You need to obviously tip within your means. And so, that's...
Sorry, is that really what... I find this so hard. So really, but how will they know if I'm tipping within my means? Could they be offended because they think I'm poor? Like, there's so many levels to this whole tipping.
A lot of people don't tip at all. So
even in America.
Even in America, yeah.
I'm one of those. I seem like a villain now listening to all of you because I can count on one hand the amount of times I've tipped at a hotel because I've left it in worse condition than I found it. And most of the time when I stay at a hotel, I put the do not disturb sign up for the entire stay, and they only end up cleaning the last day. And even if it's like a week long. So there are some people I talk to that expect new towels every day because they're at a hotel. They expect the bed made every day because they're at a hotel and they want it. And I don't care for that. I would prefer to let them focus, let the people doing all the cleaning focus on other rooms that people want that because I don't need it.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
And I don't need them coming in and out. I'd rather just have my own space for that time and then they can clean up at the end.
I always tip at the end only. So
you haven't helped me at all with my issues with tipping, you guys. I feel more confused.
It's a crapshoot. It is a crapshoot. Do you tip a dealer at a casino?
Oh,
I believe you do. Yeah, you do. You do tip a dealer.
You're supposed to.
Yeah,
You're supposed to. Yeah. But do you do it at the end or do you do it when you get a big win? I'm just saying.
I don't know. I'm not a gambler.
Tipping could last. The conversation on tipping in America alone could last a week.
Well, this is how I view it.
Right.
And I don't know, this is obviously just me. But if it's a service, if someone's providing you a service in any way, then it could be appropriate for you to tip in the United States. Obviously, it's not 100%. It could be. Like, I don't think you need to tip the guy who helps you load a lawnmower into your car at Home Depot. There's certain jobs that... Right.
I mean, I know that they don't get paid enough,
but it's an experience thing. I think
so
I think tipping can enhance your experience, especially if you're a repeat customer to whatever it is. Obviously, the more money you give, the better your experience will be. Like, if you go to a bar and you're in a crowded bar, and you finally get up to the bar, and the bartender asks you if you want a drink. If you get that drink and leave them a $20 bill, that bartender, anytime they see you, will beeline it to you and hook you up for the rest of the night. And
so your motto,
unfair.
Your motto is money talks.
Capitalism.
That's literally what I do every time I go to a bar.
That's why the world hates us.
But I mean, so I would go down to the shore, Jersey Shore, for a week with friends, and when we would get there the first night, we would put $100 bill on the table. Collectively we'd throw up some money. We'd put $100 bill on the table for the entire week. We had drinks as soon as we wanted them. And you pay a little bit, but you're paying for a better experience in a way, right? So now you don't have to worry about drinks. And so I think when in doubt, tip. And I think 20% for most cases is probably a lot unless it's a restaurant. A few bucks usually does it, in my opinion. Yeah. Tasha, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I just think that, tipping is... for what I think is like you you don't have to feel anxiety about it. Like like people, the people who would get offended will let you know before you stop the exchange. Like they will stand there and wait for you until you give them more. Like they're not going to like go home and cry. They're just gonna like, you know
But
what I mean?
even
And
that is feels confrontational to me, and it
that
makes
is
me nervous.
yeah. But that part is confrontational, and that can be awkward. But in general, if you make an effort to tip in most situations, it's probably okay. Like I don't really feel like it's been, I mean, I don't really feel like I do like a great job tipping or not a great job tipping, but I don't feel like I've like blown it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's probably, yeah, but I understand where, you know, the anxiety would come from, but I think that if you make a tip, you should just feel okay about it, you know?
One last thing I want to talk about tipping is on fishing trips.
You always tip the captain at the end. No, you tip the captain of the boat.
You tip the captain at the end, but it's like 50%.
Yeah, it's like that if you go on a boat.
You tip them 50% of the cost of your trip?
Basically.
Per person?
Well, total.
Catch fish?
Wow.
Yeah, if you
to bring you to the spot. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it is kind of ridiculous now that we're breaking it down. We do have a lot going on. Sorry, Amanda.
You see? It's so hard.
I think what Leah says is crazy.
But in those situations, do like, you know, because the boat person told you that's part of the, like, I feel like if it's like a big thing like that, somebody tells you, like,
yes,
like if I'm going on a boat ride in like you know, in a different country, or if I'm doing something that's like an adventure and it's not like an average tipping thing, like I'm told like you have to give the driver this much more or something. So I don't think you have to worry about that.
Yeah, in my experience with the boats, it's usually they tell you up front how much they're expecting.
Yeah.
As a tip. And you
So it's not even really a tip, it's like the service charge in effect.
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very confusing.
Ian, what were you saying?
I was just saying that what Leah had mentioned about her German friend, who's like, you guys ruined tipping for us. And I guess it never really occurred to me how influential traveling Americans tipping etiquette had been on the rest of the world in the travel industry, but it makes total sense, and it sucks.
It does.
Yeah, it does stink. You know, back to Tasha's point about if you don't want to feel like embarrassed about the amount you're giving. I lived in Vegas for 3 years. I always roll up my tip. So I'm like, oh, if I should only be giving, if I'm only giving $3 instead of $5, you just roll it into a little ball, and then they can't really say anything if they don't think it's enough. Like, it's like, here you go, thank you.
You always put the biggest bill on the outside when you hand it to them.
It's just me handing it. Yes, biggest bill on the outside, roll it in like thirds, and like.
Oh, that's smart. I'm going to use that.
Wow.
I'm going to get some Monopoly money too.
Perfect.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Oh,
all right. Bob, are you ready?
I'm ready. So it's time for Elliot's hoorah question of the day. We're still working on that. We're figuring that out.
You should sell that sound effect, Bob.
Yeah, it's Bob's version of a ham horn.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna start with Amanda, and then we're gonna move to Ian, then Tasha, then Leah. Amanda, if there's one thing you should not do while in a new country, what would it be?
Don't go around speaking English all the time, which we've already discussed.
Yeah.
And one thing that you should not do, that's hard. I'd like to have something more profound to say, and I just can't.
It can be very
don't spit out the food. Don't feel. I mean, actually, I have a. Is this like a lightning round, or can I give a quick story?
You can give a quick story.
Okay. You know, so you've got to try and you don't sort of screw your nose up at the food, I suppose, is what I want to say. When I was in Japan, I ate a lot of very unusual things, and a lot of them tasted, well, unusual, and especially really weird, slimy textures. Like they eat lots of things that are in the sea that I can't even name. I remember one time eating with friends, Japanese friends, and they couldn't even name them, even in Japanese. They're like, we don't know what this is. But I always tried very hard just to, eat, swallow, and try and have a pleasant expression on my face still, because I think that's, it's very inappropriate to express how you actually sometimes feel about what you're eating.
Ian.
Well, mine is less of a snafu to avoid and more of a experience enhancer, I suppose. And what I would say is I always try to don't present yourself as a tourist. Don't wear cargo pants and a backpack and carry around a map. Really try to make a concerted effort to blend in. If for no other reason than to have the most authentic experience that you possibly can, because I think I think when you aren't such a stark contrast to the local people, you have a more integrated experience. And so I'm not gonna wear a turban if I'm in the Middle East. That would be, I think, taking it too far. But I'm also not gonna wear Lululemon pants and like a Nike t-shirt. And
would you wear Lululemon pants in the US though?
I do.
Do you?
Yeah.
Are they comfortable?
Very, and I highly recommend them for travel.
Yeah. I didn't know they had them for guys, to be completely honest.
Your world is about to change and your wallet is about to empty.
Can we get some Traveler's Blueprint branded Lululemon pants, guys?
Absolutely, coming right up.
Already in production.
Yep.
Anyway, that's what I would say. Do not do not present yourself as the tourist.
I like it.
Tasha.
I would say do not be arrogant. I think that do not try to correct somebody doing something that is their way of doing it. Do not come to save people or teach them this new American thing. Obviously exchange is beautiful. And when you have an opportunity to, share your experience and have that. But I think that the number one thing about travel is to be humble and to be receptive. And so really checking your arrogance and your mission, not to take something to people, but rather than, just be open and respectful.
I like that. Leah?
I hope you guys can hear me. I'm sorry.
We can.
Because I'm breaking out for my sound is breaking up. The image is breaking up. I would say very practical. Just don't come in speaking in a very loud North American obnoxious accent. Kind of like Tasha said, humble yourself till you've learned a few things. You've done your research. Try to observe what others are doing around you. Ask the locals, maybe, how things are done, what's polite, what's correct. And that would probably be my very first thing, is just maybe not talk or act so loudly.
All right. Bob, do you have anything to add?
So in my opinion, one of the worst things you can do when traveling is enter a new country or culture with a preconceived notion of what your experience should be like. I think going back to what Ian said earlier, you should be a sponge in everything you do and try, and with everyone you meet and everything you see. You're there to learn, and so just make sure that kind of check everything at the door, and I don't want to say reinvent yourself, but step into that new country almost as a blank slate, and I think you'll have a profound experience every single time.
Yeah, and I think to sum it all up, basically don't do a lot of the stuff that you wouldn't do in your own country.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. All right.
No Cabo behavior.
No Cabo, or for you, Amanda, it would be Bali behavior, I think, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on the translation there.
Yeah. Although it's in Mexico.
It's an apt comparison.
Yeah.
No.
That's how I identify Bali. It's Australia's Mexico. They're king.
Yes, it is.
Right
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all of our guests for joining us today. If you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube, subscribe and check out our show notes. All of the links to our guests' websites will be there. Subscribe to their channels, learn a ton, learn travel etiquette. I think that's it. Tune in next month. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thanks, guys.
That was
Thank
heaps
you.
of
Thank
fun.
you all
Thank
for coming
you.
back on. This is awesome. Yeah.